2. The force of the punch pierced through the chest of the stone man. Accompanied by a hissing sound, it fell down. The huge dragon formed by the black dragon salamander did not even have time to react before it was forced back by the violent aura. It flew backwards like a kite with a broken string. It howled in pain and was in an extremely sorry state. Xiao Yan pursed his lips. The corner of his mouth drew a trace of a smile that was difficult to grasp. His charging figure immediately slowed down. His tightly clenched fingers also slowly relaxed. He glanced at the enormous black dragon that had fallen in the distance. His body flashed and he had already arrived in front of the ladder. Crack! Xiao Yan laughed coldly. His feet suddenly stepped on the head of the large black dragon. The black dragon was about to get up, but its huge body trembled and was pressed to the ground, unable to move. Don't play any tricks. I'll give you another chance. Take us to the broken sword. No matter how the giant dragon struggled, Xiao Yan remained unmoved. His eyes were filled with cold light, and his words were filled with coldness. Seeing that the giant black dragon was staring at him with a murderous look, Xiao Yan exerted force with his foot and pushed the dragon's head into the ground. Rocks flew in all directions, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the red rock ground, spreading out in an instant. I don't have time to waste talking to you. Xiao Yan clenched his teeth tightly. A fire of fury erupted in his heart. He had just entered the Heaven Divine Mountain when he was threatened by Shen Shuiwei to come here. The latter's strength was mysterious and unfathomable. Even with the Xiao Ao by his side, Xiao Yan did not dare to easily fall out with him. Now that he had been toyed with by the black dragon salamander again and again, his patience was almost completely wiped out. You will still not get anything even if you kill me. The ferocious voice of the black dragon salamander sounded after its words sounded. After which, the hard rock ground cracked open once again. The black dragon lifted its head with great difficulty. Its scarlet red eyes revealed madness. Then kill him. Xiao Yan's expression was cold, and he had lost all his patience. He stretched out his 5 fingers, and was about to crush the black dragon's neck. Xiao Yan, give him to me. All of a sudden, the Xiao Ao appeared next to Xiao Yan. It extended its palm and blocked Xiao Yan's thunderous strike. I have a way to make him speak. Facing Xiao Yan's puzzled gaze, the Xiao Ao grinned, full of confidence. I hope so. Hearing this, Xiao Yan's anger instantly dissipated. He shook his head and took a step back, no longer wanting to get involved in this matter. Boom! The Xiao Ao turned around and looked at the huge black dragon with a smile. In the next moment, purple origin cheese surged all over his body. Pure dragon aura surrounded his body, sacred and awe-inspiring. The huge black dragon's breathing became stifled when it sensed the wild and violent aura that was spreading from the Xiao Ao's body. Its eyes became even more blood-red. It wished that it could swallow the former alive. If you want to transform into a true dragon, you will need true dragon chi. How about this? Bring us to the broken sword, and I can lend you a hand in transforming into a dragon. The Xiao Ao smiled. Its eyes rippled, as if it could see through the heart of the huge black dragon. Is that true? The huge black dragon's body suddenly trembled when it heard this. Its eyes widened as it looked at the Xiao Ao in disbelief. The former's shocked voice resounded in the void. I swear in the name of the Azure Dragon. The Xiao Ao's expression turned serious. It pounded its own chest with its fist, its expression solemn. According to the rumors, the Azure Dragon was one of the 4 spirits, and was the ancestor of one of the dragon bloodlines. It swore in the name of the former that it was the highest contract of dragon blood. Good. Deal. After hearing the solemn vow of the Xiao Ao, the huge black dragon's head hurriedly nodded in agreement. An excited voice was also swiftly transmitted over. It was afraid that the Xiao Ao would go back on its word. The reason why it had waited for so many years was because it was waiting for the opportunity to transform into a true dragon. Compared to this, the sword, which possessed an endless amount of power, had become useless. At the same time that the voice sounded, the black light on the black dragon's body suddenly withdrew. It was as if it had been ignited, and in an instant, it had already transformed into the size of a lizard. I'll take you to find the broken sword. If you lie to me and give up your lives, I won't let you have a good time. The black dragon salamander man stood up and stared at Xiao Yan. His voice was trembling. Xiao Yan did not speak. He looked at the Xiao Ao. When the black dragon salamander saw this, it swiftly turned its gaze towards the ladder. I will naturally do as I say. The Xiao Ao straightened its chest. Its expression was solemn and it did not appear to be joking at all. All right. The black dragon salamander finally nodded heavily when it saw this. Its dark and cold eyes looked at Xiao Yan once again. With a glance, his body suddenly moved and he arrived in midair. The black dragon salamander sat cross-legged in the empty space. It appeared to be in human form. Both of its hands were placed in front of its chest. Although its throat had been penetrated, it still muttered something. Why are you helping it? He glanced at the black dragon salamander in the distant sky. Xiao Yan shook his head and smiled bitterly. Since it has agreed, why do we need to spend so much effort to find it? The Xiao Ao narrowed its eyes and smiled. It put its hands on its hips and said, Then, what harm will it do to you if you help it transform into a dragon? His expression became serious. Xiao Yan frowned. This was the thing he was most worried about. If it damaged the origin of the Xiao Ao, he would deny it no matter what. It's just a little bit of effort. Besides, I can see its aura. Even without my help, it will only need 1,000 years at most before it can transform into a dragon. Rather than that, why don't we attack first? The Xiao Ao chuckled and communicated with Xiao Yan's mind. So that's how it is. Xiao Yan felt relieved and nodded his head. This could not be any better. Rumble. Soon, the surrounding red mountain peaks seemed to have received a mysterious call. Each of them rose from the ground and transformed into stone giants. The giants stood tall and mighty, as though they were blocking the sky. Under the control of the black dragon salamander, several stone giants strode forward and gathered in the same direction. They were scattered in different places, as if they were triggering a unique formation. Buzz buzz. Following a world-shaking explosion, the heads of 7 stone giants exploded at the same time. Dust filled the air as the shattered rocks were sent flying. Crimson sand flew and covered the entire sky, as if they had entered a crimson world. Rumble. Rumble. The 7 stone giants stood firmly on the spot, and their heads were severed. Lava poured down like a waterfall, converging at the center at the same time. Xiao Yan and the Xiao Ao stood in the distance. The surging lava flowed towards the surrounding land. The two of them flew into the air and looked at the scene in front of them in shock. The magma had already gathered in the middle of the 7 giants. It was hundreds of feet tall, and it whistled into the sky. A frightening aura spread out from within it, as if it contained a peerless, ferocious creature. Swoosh! The whirlwind formed by the magma suddenly split apart. A dark golden light slowly rose. The light scattered and an ordinary black ancient sword appeared. Upon closer inspection, the sword hilt was covered with fragmented lines. It did not emit any aura, appearing just like a scrap metal. This is the so-called broken sword? Xiao Ao's eyes instantly locked onto the black ancient sword. He raised his brows, and was somewhat surprised. This thing was really hidden well, and it had actually revealed itself in such a manner. Xiao Yan's gaze was similarly attracted by the black ancient sword. He looked at this ancient sword that was almost rusted. His heart was similarly shocked and bewildered. He opened his mouth but was unable to speak. Whether it was Mu Yuyang's heavenly net sword or the Thunder Emperor sword that Xiao Tianyi had seized from the Thunder Cloud City, the energy contained within was far greater than the black ancient sword in front of him. If he insisted on finding out the similarity, the only thing he could do was to have a mysterious feeling that he couldn't see through it. It has rusted for too long? The Xiao Ao mumbled to itself as it scratched its head in a daze. It had seen many heavenly weapons before, and had never heard of a rusty sacred weapon. Shen Shuiwei said that only special methods can unseal the seal. Could it be that some kind of seal has really been set up? Xiao Yan pondered for a moment, then swept his gaze over. The black dragon salamander stood up while breathing heavily. It looked at the black ancient sword in the magma with great envy, and said weakly, "This is the broken sword that is comparable to a sacred weapon, also known as the Wang slaying sword. It is said that it can cut through all falsehood and is extremely powerful." Wang slaying sword. Who is the owner of this mountain? Hearing this, the Xiao Ao's expression changed, and he asked urgently. I don't know his real name, but I heard that he's called the Illusionist Old Man. The black dragon salamander had been captured by the Illusionist Old Man and placed here when it had just gained sentience. After who knew how many years had passed, it had countless descendants. Illusionist Old Man. The things recorded in the ancient texts seemed to be true. Hearing the black dragon salamander's words, Xiao Ao's entire body trembled, his expression filled with shock. "Who is that?" Xiao Yan was surprised and bewildered. He looked at the Xiao Ao. Ever since the Xiao Ao had awakened its bloodline, it knew more about the secrets of the ancient era. There were some things that it knew more than Xiao Yan. He is a legendary figure. It is said that he was born before the time of the birth of the Yin-Yang Saint Lord. Back then, he fought for the position of the Mingan Divine Domain's Domain Lord. Unfortunately, he was defeated by a single move and disappeared without a trace. I didn't expect him to be famous in the Heaven Divine Mountain. Unfortunately, he failed again. Xiao Ao sighed and his tone was filled with mixed emotions. Fighting for the position of Domain Lord is indeed a fierce character. Xiao Yan was speechless. This illusionist old man was probably at least a saint-level expert when he was alive. His name entered the Heaven Divine Mountain and wanted to live another life, but he still ended in failure. It can't be wrong. It should be him. The Illusionist Heart Sutra that he cultivates is an extremely rare technique that can control the mind. It's rumored that he used this technique to match with the Illusionist sword and almost killed his competitors. The Xiao Ao pondered for a moment, then raised its eyebrows and said, "I heard that after the Illusionist old man was defeated, the sword hilt of the Illusionist sword was shattered. I don't know where it went. The main part of the Illusionist Heart Sutra is recorded on it. Without the Illusionist Heart Sutra, there is no way to use the Illusionist sword. Does this mean that Shen Shuiwei has obtained the broken sword's hilt?" Xiao Yan was slightly stunned when he said this. After hearing what the Xiao Ao said, it seemed like this was possible. However, that is a cultivation technique cultivated by a supreme saint. How could he possibly comprehend it? The Xiao Ao shook its head. Its face was filled with disbelief. It was obvious that it was shocked by its own thoughts. Xiao Yan pursed his lips and did not make a sound. He flew to the side of the black ancient sword and carefully looked at the ordinary ancient sword. There were indescribable patterns carved on it. There were obvious cracks on the hilt of the sword. It should be where the Illusionist Heart Sutra was recorded. The Illusionist's sword was about half the height of a human. It came out of the magma, but the sword was still covered in dust and rust. It was unknown how many years it had been. When the Illusionist old man advanced to the Saint Realm, he broke into the battle domain with the Illusionist sword in his hand. He swept across thousands of miles of the battle domain. Wherever he went, no one could defeat him. In the end, he became a saint through battle. Countless legends about him were left behind in the battle domain. The Xiao Ao crossed his arms behind his head and recalled the past of the Illusionist old man. He had followed Yi Tianqian everywhere, and many interesting legends were known to him. Even though he has lived a long life, in the end, he still turned into dust. Xiao Yan sighed lightly. He thought of the Yin-Yang Saint Lord. He was an extremely talented man who stood at the top of his generation. Even the Domain Lord didn't dare to compete with him, but in the end, he still couldn't resist the erosion of time. How dare you compete with the Domain Lord? This strength is enough to make you proud of the present world. Senior, please leave, this junior is rude. Xiao Yan put his palms together and whispered to himself. A trace of crimson gold flame flashed in his eyes, and the origin chi in his hand wrapped around it. He was about to pick up this illusionist sword. Buzz! The moment his palm touched the illusionist sword, Xiao Yan's mind was shaken. It was as if he had suffered some kind of erosion. His eyes turned red in an instant, and his body stiffened. He stood motionless on the spot. What's wrong? Xiao Yan's sudden reaction startled the Xiao Ao. It hurriedly stepped forward. When it saw the former's appearance, it couldn't help but let out a surprised cry. It looked at the black dragon salamander and said furiously, "What trick did you use again?" "I didn't. Who knows what's so strange about this illusionist sword?" The black dragon salamander hurriedly clarified, but a trace of a gloating smile flashed across its eyes. The things in these graves are extremely strange. The Xiao Ao gritted its teeth and looked at the motionless Xiao Yan. At the same time, its heart was filled with anxiety, and it couldn't help but feel some anger towards Shen Shuiwei. Wave after wave of attacks that were like electric currents kept bombarding Xiao Yan's heart. The darkness in front of him suddenly became clear and bright. Following a burst of silvery laughter, a pink little girl jumped up and down in front of Xiao Yan. "Daddy." The little girl was wearing a pink dress that was carved out of jade. She was as cute as a porcelain doll. She stretched out her little hand and pulled on the corner of Xiao Yan's clothes. Her dark eyes were narrowed into slits as she spoke in a crisp voice. "Xiao Xiao." Xiao Yan's heart shook violently when he saw the little girl in front of him. His nose ached and the corners of his eyes became moist. He hurriedly squatted down and looked at the face that his eyes could not be more familiar with. Xiao Yan hugged her and for a moment, tears filled his eyes. It hurts. Being tightly hugged by Xiao Yan, Xiao Xiao's cute brows wrinkled slightly and she pouted and said softly, "It's Daddy's fault, Daddy's fault." Xiao Yan hurriedly let go of Xiao Xiao's hand when he heard her. He caressed Xiao Xiao's little head. The latter's big eyes flashed and blinked, almost melting Xiao Yan's heart. "Father, don't leave Xiao Xiao anymore, all right? I want you to always stay with me." Xiao Xiao spoke gently and touched Xiao Yan's face. Her dark eyes rolled around, looking extremely cute. "I'm not leaving, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving my Xiao Xiao anymore." Xiao Yan held Xiao Xiao's small hand with tears in his eyes and hurriedly nodded. Why is he crying and laughing? The Xiao looked at Xiao Yan, who was frozen on the spot, crying and laughing as if he had gone mad. His heart was filled with anxiety as he looked at the black dragon salamander and roared. Due to the summoning of the illusionist sword, the black dragon salamander had yet to recover its strength. Sitting cross-legged on the spot, it glanced at Xiao Yan and said with a cold smile, "That is an illusionist sword. It can give people an unrealistic illusion. This fellow has obviously fallen for the illusionist sword's trick." He paused for a moment. The black dragon salamander turned its gaze to the black ancient sword in Xiao Yan's hand and said seriously, "I never thought that after so many years, this thing would still possess such power. It is indeed worthy of being a thing comparable to a sacred weapon." What fabrication? Xiao Yan's mind is so firm. How could he lose his mind because of fabrication? Xiao's heart was agitated as he cursed in a low voice, then said in a deep voice, "How do we resolve this?" "Remove? It's very simple. Just chop off the hand holding the illusionist sword." Upon hearing this, the black dragon salamander gloated and hurriedly said, "Although I lost a hand, it's still considered to be able to remove the fabrication." Before he could finish his words, the black dragon salamander's eyes suddenly widened. It stared at the scene in front of it with its mouth wide open. The Xiao did not hesitate at all. The purple origin chi gathered in its palm and turned into an origin chi blade, slashing at Xiao Yan's arm that was holding the illusionist sword. The purple-colored origin chi was formed. It was just like a sharp blade. Under the control of the Xiao, it slashed towards Xiao Yan's wrist. Wherever the origin chi passed by, the air would buzz. It contained a great power. The strength of the latter's body could be said to be monstrous. If it wasn't for this great power, it would really be impossible for him to cut off an arm. The sudden movement of the Xiao also caused the black dragon salamander's heart to tremble. Immediately, it could not help but grin. It really hoped that such a scene would occur. Kai! Fresh blood wildly shot out from Xiao Yan's wrist with the sound of his bones being broken. It dyed the illusionist sword red in an instant. The former's body trembled. His eyes suddenly widened. A bloodthirsty madness swiftly spread across his face. Xiao Xiao! Xiao Xiao! The bone-piercing pain did not make Xiao Yan come back to his senses quickly. His eyes were red and he stood rooted to the ground. He roared like a beast and let the blood flow from his wrist. In a moment, Xiao Xiao, who was smiling sweetly in front of him, suddenly had blood all over her body. Like a bloody person, she smiled and disappeared in front of him. At that moment, he reached out his hand to grab her but could only watch his daughter disappear. The latter's bright smile deeply pierced his heart. The pain of losing his hand also could not wake him up. "Ah!" Xiao Yan raised his head to the sky and roared furiously. He was like a wild beast that had lost its mind. Gritting his teeth, he suddenly glared furiously at the Xiao beside him. Roaring furiously, he extended his intact arm. His 5 fingers were like an eagle's claw as they pierced through the air and struck the Xiao's chest. "Damn it! It hasn't woken up yet." Seeing this, the Xiao gritted its teeth. A trace of determination flashed across its eyes. Its body flashed like a thunderbolt, and its speed was no slower than Xiao Yan's starlight silent step. In an instant, it arrived behind Xiao Yan. Its 5 fingers formed a palm and lightly struck Xiao Yan's back. The latter felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The strength in his body quickly dissipated, and he fell down powerlessly. The Xiao sighed softly. In the next moment, it appeared where Xiao Yan had landed. It spread its arms and firmly hugged him. You. When he saw the strength that the Xiaoao had suddenly displayed, the black dragon salamander was extremely shocked. He had deeply experienced Xiao Yan's strength before. It had almost lost all ability to fight back, although it had seen the strength of the Xiaoao before. But compared to Xiao Yan, he felt much weaker. Now, it seemed like he had completely turned the tables. It was obvious that Xiao Yan had yet to fully awaken from his illusory state. Due to the influence of the illusory scene, the strike just now must have contained a tremendous fury, and his strength was much stronger than usual. In front of the Xiaoao, he couldn't even withstand a single blow. Cut the crap. Putting Xiao Yan lightly on the ground, the Xiaoao glanced at the black dragon salamander and spoke coldly. The latter was so frightened that it hurriedly shut its mouth. Currently, its throat had already gradually recovered by relying on the effect of the magma. Swoosh. The Xiaoao squatted down. Its expression was solemn. Purple origin chi flowed in its palm and gently covered Xiao Yan's broken hand. It temporarily stopped the fresh blood from flowing out. Although the latter possessed a situation skill, the situation skill that Xiao Yan was not familiar with could only slowly recover his injuries before he became clear-headed. What a headache. I don't know how long it will take to recover. Even if it recovers, will it affect the performance of my strength? After muttering to himself a few times, the Xiaoao helplessly pursed its lips. There was nothing it could do. In order to help Xiao Yan get out of the realm of illusion, this was the only thing it could do. Of course, if it wasn't for the latter having a situation spell, he wouldn't have dared to make a move. Xiao Yan, so you met your daughter. I'm really sorry to wake you up from this beautiful dream. With a gentle smile, Xiaoao muttered to himself. His words no longer had the childishness from before. The current him had an indescribable maturity in his eyes. And there's a feeling of 10,000 years of vicissitudes. If you're so strong, why are you following this guy? In the distance, the black dragon salamander bared its teeth. It was somewhat puzzled, and it couldn't help but speak. Before this, it had clearly seen that Xiao Yan was the leader of the two. What do you know? The Xiaoao finally let out a cold snort after a long while. The corner of its mouth slowly formed a smile as it looked at Xiao Yan's gradually calming face. It carried some relief. Hiss. The black dragon salamander clenched its teeth. It did not know what to say. Suddenly, its eyes focused as it said in a deep voice, I have also taken out the illusionist sword. Don't go against what you said. I'll remember that. The Xiaoao nodded. It rose to its feet and looked at the black dragon salamander. After a moment of thought, it suddenly cut open the palm of its right hand and activated the origin chi. It forced out a drop of extremely pure purple blood. As soon as the purple blood appeared, it was as if a dragon's roar was heard. It shook the black dragon salamander's body, and it couldn't come back to its senses for a long time. The Xiaoao's face was slightly pale, and the purple blood in its palm was crystal clear. It was like a jade pendant that had been meticulously carved, and it was emitting a soul-stirring energy. This is the true dragon blood. You have enough time to cultivate. What you lack is only a blade. Consume it and cultivate for 100 years. It is enough to transform into a dragon. As he spoke, the Xiaoao waved its hand, and the purple drop of blood arrived in front of the black dragon salamander. Many thanks. The black dragon salamander's eyes suddenly turned red when it heard this. It opened its trembling mouth and hurriedly extended its claws. It carefully held the black dragon salamander in its hand. It could not help but suck in a deep breath as it sensed the majestic strength that filled it. An intoxicated expression immediately surfaced on its face. This was a true dragon bloodline. How are we going to get out of here? The Xiaoao's face turned slightly pale. It took a deep breath and said, Don't worry. When he wakes up, I'll send you guys out. I guarantee that you'll be able to leave this place safely. After obtaining the true dragon blood drop that could transform him into a true dragon, the black dragon salamander was in a good mood. Seeing the Xiaoao becoming more and more pleasing to the eye, it hurriedly said, All right. Hearing this, the Xiaoao did not have the mood to say anything else. It sat cross-legged beside Xiao Yan with its eyes closed. The purple origin chi surged around its body and gave the black dragon salamander a drop of blood essence. The consumption of blood essence was not as easy as what it had said to Xiao Yan previously. In midair, the illusionist sword was still standing there quietly. The black ancient sword was stained with blood, making it look mysterious and ferocious. Who? After an unknown amount of time, the unconscious Xiao Yan finally opened his eyes. The moment he woke up, a bone-piercing pain came from his left arm. Raising his arm to take a look, Xiao Yan was slightly stunned. His wrist was no longer bleeding. Traces of warmth was transmitted over. Clearly, it was slowly recovering under the circulation of the situation skill. What's going on? He touched his aching brain. Xiao Yan sat up and looked at the Xiao Ao that was still sitting cross-legged to regulate his breathing. He then looked at the illusionist's sword in the distance. When he saw the broken hand that was gripped tightly on the hilt of the sword, he suddenly came to a realization. This fellow is really willing to make a move. Xiao Yan smiled and thought of the scene in the illusion. Xiao Yan's smile froze. Although he had forgotten most of the scenes, Xiao Xiao's appearance was imprinted in his memory in a trance. The illusionist's sword is indeed an illusion. Suddenly, Xiao Yan came back to his senses and patted his head. His eyes suddenly became firm. His will was firm. Since he had come out of the illusion, he would not be bound by it anymore. 1 inch your hand was okay, but to wake you up, that was the only thing you could do. When he opened his eyes and saw Xiao Yan staring at him, the Xiao Ao stuck out its tongue and said with a coy smile. There's a situation skill. This bit of injury is nothing. Xiao Yan smiled and did not care about it at all. Under the circulation of the situation skill, the wound was healing quickly, and the pain was also reduced by a lot. What's wrong with you? Your qi is so much weaker than before. Xiao Yan's face suddenly darkened, and he asked in a low voice. This. Before the Xiao Ao could reply, Xiao Yan coldly snorted. He glanced at the black dragon salamander in the distance, which was sitting cross-legged with its eyes closed, and spoke in a cold voice. If anything happens to you, I will kill that fellow. Also, don't lie to me in the future. It'll make me very worried. He turned his head around. Xiao Yan patted the Xiao Ao's shoulder and said sincerely. Got it. Got it. The Xiao Ao smiled embarrassedly, like a child who had done something wrong. It nodded its head repeatedly. The illusionist's sword is out. How are we going to take it out? Shen Shuiwei is still outside. Changing the topic, the Xiao Ao's expression turned slightly serious. When Xiao Yan was unconscious, he had also considered this matter seriously. With his true strength, he was afraid that he wouldn't be a match for Shen Shuiwei. Xiao Yan should also be aware of this. But if he were to hand over the illusionist's sword just like that, perhaps the latter wouldn't easily agree to it. Just give the illusionist's sword to Shen Shuiwei. Xiao Yan did not hesitate in the slightest when he heard this. He directly said it. This caused the Xiao Ao, who was still thinking of convincing him, to be slightly stunned. It looked at the illusionist's sword that was floating in the distant sky thoughtfully. A pondering light flashed across its eyes. However, even after spending so much effort, we still can't make a wedding dress for him. We can use this illusionist's sword to do some things. Xiao Yan stood up and flew to the vicinity of the illusionist's sword. The sound of the wind woke the black dragon salamander up. The latter glanced at Xiao Yan in surprise before hurriedly withdrawing. It was somewhat afraid of this fellow. There is something else here. For example, the qi method left behind by the illusionist old man. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Yan suddenly looked at the black dragon salamander and frowned. Are you kidding me? After such a long time, the illusionist's sword has almost been sealed by dust. Even the holy arts can't be preserved. No. Seeing Xiao Yan's gaze, the black dragon salamander couldn't help but smile. Just as it was about to speak frankly and confidently, it sensed the sharp gaze of the former and shook its head hastily. If you don't have it, then so be it. Say so much nonsense. Xiao Yan coldly snorted. He did not have a good impression of the black dragon salamander. Currently, he was still somewhat worried about the Xiao Ao's injuries. Previously, the Xiao Ao had overdrawn its blood essence and had been recuperating for quite some time. He did not want this to happen again. This illusionist sword is comparable to a sacred artifact. As long as I don't come into contact with it, it should be fine. The broken hand that was cut off by the Xiao Ao was still tightly gripped on the hilt of the sword. There was no longer any color of blood on it. Xiao Yan's expression could not help but become strange as he asked. That's right. Anyone who cultivates the Illusionist Heart Sutra will not be affected by the Illusionist sword. The black dragon salamander could be considered one of the creatures that understood the Illusionist sword. Upon hearing this, it hurriedly nodded its head. Since Shen Shuiwei dares to have designs on the Illusionist sword, I'm afraid he has cultivated the Illusionist Heart Sutra. He shouldn't be affected by the Illusionist's sword, right? The Xiao came to Xiao Yan's side and said with some doubt. He naturally knew that Xiao Yan wanted to use the Illusionist's sword to threaten Shen Shuihui. Even if we can't affect him, we can't make a losing deal. Besides, if he cultivates the Illusionist Heart Sutra, it would be even better. A cold light flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes as he looked at his broken arm. The origin chi decisively dispersed, and the wound came into contact with the blazing air. Xiao Yan took a deep breath and his face returned to normal. Soul energy spread out, causing the broken arm and wrist to perfectly fuse together. Using his soul energy, the broken arm seemed to have grown on his wrist. With ease, he picked up the Illusionist sword. You really have a way. Seeing this, the Xiao's eyes lit up. Initially, he was worried about how to bring the Illusionist sword out. Although Xiao Yan's move was not very magical, it still made him happy. Xiao Yan also chuckled. After witnessing the might of the Illusionist sword, he had the thought of cutting off his own hand after he woke up. The Xiao had done it for him. Lead the way. Glancing at the black dragon salamander, Xiao Yan spoke in a grumpy manner. The former seemed to have understood something. The true dragon blood that was given to him by the Xiao did not dare to speak. He nodded obediently and arrived in front of a spatial zone. He pointed his finger and the spatial zone trembled slightly. In the next moment, a formation appeared in front of him. Under the lead of the black dragon salamander, the two of them successfully left this space. Only a couple of giant rock men, who had lost their heads, stood quietly. They were arranged in a strange formation. The magma in the middle scattered and was empty. Illusionist old man, just how powerful are you? My father was almost defeated by you back then. Shen Shuihui was still sitting cross-legged beside the magma river. He whispered to himself with a calm expression. His body was emitting an exceptionally cold aura, causing the fire lizards living under the magma to not dare to get close to him. Unfortunately, no matter how strong you are, you have still turned into dirt. The Illusionist Heart Sutra is still with me. With a soft laugh, Shen Suyu's face revealed an unreadable expression. Light emerged from his eyes, as if there were stars shining in them, causing others to be unable to grasp them. He has finally come out. Suddenly, Shen Shuihui raised his brows and moved his body. He was already standing on a red rock by the side. His eyes looked towards a magma river in the distance. In the next moment, the magma surged. Xiao Yan and the Xiao jumped out from it at the same time. Long time no see, both of you. Shen Shuihui gently smiled when he saw Xiao Yan and the Xiao. His eyes were looking at the former's hand. When he saw Xiao Yan holding the Illusionist sword tightly in his hand, a joy appeared on his face. At the same time, some surprise flashed across his eyes. Your nose is quite sharp. You actually found this place. Xiao Yan laughed coldly. He raised his left hand and waved the Illusionist sword. He said, what a pity. Apart from this broken sword, I didn't find anything else. My young master Shen, what do you intend to exchange for it? Shen Shuihui didn't hear Xiao Yan's sarcasm. He only smiled and said softly, this isn't a broken sword. The reputation of the Illusionist sword is well known in the Mingan divine domain. After a pause, Shen Shuihui grinned and said, that might be my guess wrong. It has been too long, and those holy arts and whatnot have lost their effect. Xiao Yan, thank you for your hard work. This is the broken sword. Leave it to me, only I can exert his true power. After saying that, Shen Shuihui stretched out his hand towards Xiao Yan. You have already said that this thing is comparable to a sacred weapon. Isn't it a bit too whimsical to think that you can take it away without paying anything? Xiao Yan sneered, casually waving the Illusionist sword around as he spoke with disdain. Seeing Xiao Yan casually waving the Illusionist sword, Shen Shuihui was slightly surprised. Then, his expression returned to normal and he said, what you said makes some sense. Let me ask you first, did you get affected when you took this broken sword for the first time? Influenced? What influence? Xiao Yan was stunned and asked doubtfully. It's true that it has been put away for too long. Even the Illusionist formation inside has lost its effectiveness. Upon hearing this, Shen Shuihui muttered to himself. Then, he nodded his head and raised his head. Then tell me, what kind of compensation do you need? Xiao Yan grinned and stretched out a finger. According to what you said earlier, I won't go too far. I will exchange it with a scroll of high-grade holy arts. What do you think? One in the hot underground cave, several rivers of lava flowed, and the hot air bubbles kept exploding, filling the air with hot air, and the hot wind blew against one's face, making one feel stuffy in the chest. Advanced Holy Arts? Shen Shuihui had a tall and straight figure. He wore a silver robe, and there were stars embroidered on it. There were stars flickering in his eyes, and it seemed as if he was exuding an awe-inspiring aura. He grinned and looked at Xiaoyan. The latter met Shen Suyu's gaze and also looked straight at the former. Traces of crimson gold flames quietly appeared in his eyes, and it was filled with a domineering aura that could burn the entire world. What an exorbitant demand! You should know how much a high-grade holy arts is worth. Seeing that Xiaoyan wasn't intimidated by him at all, Shen Shuihui raised his head and didn't look directly at the former. Although the Illusionist sword is comparable to a sacred weapon, the Illusionist formation in it has already been destroyed. No one knows how long it will take to restore it to its peak. Moreover, you don't know yet, right? To master the Illusionist sword, one also needs the Illusionist Heart Sutra. The two are indispensable. Do you think it's worth a high-grade holy arts? Shen Shuihui spoke with confidence and confidence. He shook his head and smiled even more brightly. Don't be wrong. Xiaoyan gently smiled when he heard this. The Illusionist sword in his hand suddenly struck the ground and easily shattered layers of rocks. I am exchanging the Illusionist sword with you not because I think that the value of the Illusionist sword is high, but because it depends on how much value it has in your heart. I think that in your heart, it should be worth a high-grade holy arts. Xiaoyan grinned and said in a relaxed tone. His words caused Shen Suyu's smile to freeze. You are eloquent, but you are right. The value of the Illusionist sword in my heart far exceeds the value of a holy arts. Shen Shuihui pursed his lips and smiled. He lowered his hands behind his back and said softly, So now, do you want to give it to me by yourself, or do you want me to snatch it from you? Hey, Shen, don't go back on your word. What did you say before? The Xiaoao raised its brows and strode forward. Its eyes were filled with fury, and it wished it could punch Shen Suyu's smiling face. Who asked you to ask for such an exorbitant price? Although a holy arts isn't a big deal, it isn't a cabbage on the street, right? Upon hearing this, Shen Shuihui let out a sigh. His imposing manner dissipated, and he shrugged his shoulders as he spoke. Then what about your sincerity? Xiaoyan seemed to be quite calm. He held the Illusionist sword in his hand and said in a soft voice. Don't think too much about the holy arts. I think it suits you. Shen Shuihui was silent for a moment. He waved his silver robe, and a short green sprout trembled in his palm. The two green leaves seemed to have just grown out. They were fresh and green, and they gave off a feeling of vitality. What is this? Xiaoyan raised his eyebrows, and a trace of astonishment flashed across his eyes. The moment the green sprout appeared, he actually felt that the fire source energy in the cave was flowing rapidly. One of the most precious things in Mingan Divine Domain. Shen Shuihui smiled, and a hint of pride flashed across his eyes. I've heard of fire subhuti. Fire subhuti? The Xiaoao's surprised voice had already sounded while Xiaoyan was muttering softly. The most ancient fire Bodhi tree in the Mingan Divine Domain? Could it still exist in this world? When he heard the Xiaoao's exclamation, Xiaoyan suddenly recalled. It was said that at the place where the Mingan Divine Domain was born, there was a Bodhi tree that supported the heavens and the earth in 5 different directions. It represented the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Later on, the Mingan Divine Domain experienced countless calamities of different sizes. The 5 Bodhi trees that were born from the heaven and earth also disappeared, and the last fire subhuti. It was rumored that the branches of the tree had been cut off by the Yin-Yang Sacred Lord, and no one knew where it was stored. Although the 5 Bodhi trees didn't have any supernatural powers that could shock the world, the 5 elemental origin chi contained within each leaf could be said to be the thickest in the world. Is this the fire Bodhi tree's sapling? Recovering from his shock, the Xiaoao looked at the sapling in Shen Suyu's hand and couldn't help but laugh. The green sprout in the palm of the latter obviously did not belong to the Bodhi tree. As for the sapling of the Bodhi tree, it was even more unbelievable. The Bodhi tree is the accompanying holy item of the Mingan Divine Domain. It is not inferior to the 12 holy items. An Illusionist sword is like an exchange. How can there be such a good thing? Shen Shuihui coldly snorted. He looked at the green sprout in his hand and said softly, "Although this thing is not taken from the fire Bodhi tree, plant it and use your own origin chi to nourish it. When it matures, the fruit that it bears will contain the purest flame of the Mingan divine domain. This kind of flame has an extremely strong effect in both concocting pills and fighting enemies. It is comparable to the flame in the heart of the heaven divine mountain. Compared to the monarch flame, it has its own advantages. It's not a loss to exchange it for illusionist swords with you, right? Who exactly are you?" Xiao Yan took a deep breath. His sharp eyes suddenly looked at Shen Shuihui, and his expression became serious. Now that he knew about the legend of the fire subhut, he was even more suspicious of Shen Suyu's identity. "Why do you care so much?" Shen Shuihui glanced at Xiao Yan indifferently. He sneered and did not reply. He turned his palm and handed the green seedling to Xiao Yan. "This can only produce 10 fruits at most. It depends on how you nourish it. If you are unlucky, you might not even have one." Seeing the Xiaoao take the illusionist sword for Xiao Yan, Shen Shuihui laughed and stretched out his hand to ask for the illusionist sword from Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan frowned but did not say anything in the end. Just as he was about to hand the illusionist sword over to Shen Shuihui, the cave suddenly shook violently. The magma river under his feet splashed out like oil in a hot pot. The ground shook as if there was an earthquake. The illusionist sword is the supporting point of this mountain peak. It has been taken out, and this mountain peak has not been left for long. "Hurry up and give it to me. Let's get out of here." Seeing that Xiao Yan's hand had stopped moving, Shen Shuihui became anxious. He shouted, and then stretched out his hand to grab it. Xiao Yan's feet trembled. His body swayed and the illusionist sword in his hand could not be held. Shen Shuihui reacted quickly and grabbed the illusionist sword in his hand with lightning speed. Buzz. A vague ear-piercing sound seemed to pass by. The expression on Shen Suyu's face swiftly froze. His body also stiffened. The glow in his eyes gradually lost its luster. His 5 fingers tightly held the illusionist sword. Clearly, he had fallen into an illusion. This earthquake really came at the perfect time. Xiao Yan involuntarily parted his mouth and smiled when he successfully caused Shen Shuihui to fall into an illusion. The sudden earthquake caused Shen Shuihui to completely lose his last bit of caution. It had actually helped him quite a bit. "Xiao Ao, let's go." He looked at the stiff Shen Shuihui once again. Xiao Yan shouted softly. As the cave shook violently, huge rocks fell down one after another. Lava also erupted from time to time. Countless fire lizards fled in all directions. They all felt a sense of danger. "Let's go." The Xiaoao carefully kept the green seedling and followed Xiao Yan out. As for Shen Shuihui, the two of them naturally did not take him seriously. If he died because of this, it could only be said that he was weak and could not be blamed on others. Moreover, he died because of a natural disaster.